welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your lying host, Sean McKinda.
And I am your deceitful host, Jackson Keller.
And why are we lying this time? Well, if you've read the title and you've listened to last week's episode, you know we're lying because once again, we got lied to. I don't know how this one happened, but fucking Invisible Man isn't coming out until tomorrow for day of recording. So we're not talking about that. Instead, we're talking about a movie that came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago at time of recording. We're talking about Fantasy Island.
I literally, when we mutually realized that Invisible Man wasn't going to be available, we'll do it next week. I think we can comfortably say that now.
Yeah. It's still on the docket if you're really excited for our Invisible Man takes.
Come back to hear us debate the merits of horror as a genre, which even though ostensibly we're talking about a horror movie, we will not be doing today.
No, there's just way too much else to talk about with this movie that, like, the merits of horror is not even... We did not even talk about that in our pre-discussion.
No. I just want everyone to realize, like, if you're sitting here scratching your head, like, Fantasy Island, what? It's because I literally opened up my app for the movie showtimes. I'm like, well, what the hell is playing right now? I scrolled through, I saw Fantasy Island. I'll admit the title caught my eye. I'm like, that sounds like schlock. And then I opened it up and saw it was a Blumhouse production. I said, this is schlock. Let's talk about this one.
Oh, yeah, I am vaguely familiar with Fantasy Island just because Jenny Nicholson did some tweets on it way back when. She might have put a video out about it. I wouldn't be surprised if she did. This feels like something that she would do like a script doctor on, which is basically what we're going to be doing throughout this podcast, to be perfectly honest. Sorry, Jenny. But yeah, it's got a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's sitting at like a 67% on Google user scores, which is the metric that I usually go by because Google user scores are almost always very good. And to sit at 67% means that enough people were unhappy with it and still felt the need to write it up in Google. So, yikes.
Yeah, because I feel like 10% Rotten Tomatoes, I feel like this is one of those cases that's a little misleading. Like, I feel like if you're not thinking about how Rotten Tomatoes works, that's just like an aggregate of like binary yes or no scores, like see this, don't see this, rotten or fresh. Like if you look at it more as like a Metacritic, like when you see 10% on Metacritic, you think like, oh my god, this is like Bubsy 3D tier. But not really. I mean, like I feel like a lot of, the Google user scores is maybe more surprising to me because I feel like a lot of people could walk into this movie and be like, that was fun, I guess.
Potentially. I just think that, like, the final third is where it just gets into just complete, utter fucking nonsense and we'll just lose everyone. And, like...
It does go off the rails, that's true.
And there's that whole recency effect where, like, that's the part that might stick in your brain a little bit more. So, like, the beginning of the movie, where there's some interesting and good ideas, is just like, forget that shit. We're gonna... What the fuck happened in that last 15 minutes?
Yeah, I suppose you're right. I think that like general audiences in particular, not that this is a this is not to be like a slam on like the public or whatever, but I feel like general audiences are particularly susceptible to like disliking a movie for its ending for exactly the reason that you've just said. Like, I feel like if you ask
Granted, that's coming from two people who, at least on my end, really did not like The Good Liar because of its ending.
True. Good Liar wasn't a special case.
Oh, entirely. I'm just listen, Jackson. I'm ingratiating us to the everyman. You understand?
Well, no, I mean, I was about to do the same because endings are important. I've definitely like had my opinion on a thing at least slightly soured because the ending was bad, even if I really liked the rest. But yeah, that tends to be kind of the gut reaction. Like if you ask just like your pal who maybe doesn't keep up with movies so much, like, oh, he says I saw Fantasy Island this weekend. I'm like, oh, how was that? What was that about? And I'd be like, and then he'd say like, oh, it was bad. The ending was stupid as fuck. Like I remember, the best example of this, actually, Edge of Tomorrow. That was a great movie, great little sci-fi action movie.
I still haven't seen it, and I still really, really need to. It's got like a critical darling thing. Like there's a big groundswell for it.
Yeah, I think you would like it. And that movie, you know, without wishing to spoil, that movie's got kind of a stupid ending, and it's not even stupid in the way that like this movie's is, where it's like an entire like act of the movie. It's just like the last few scenes of the ending are kind of dumb and maybe make you go like, what? But otherwise, yeah, that movie's great. But I think that's one of the reasons that movie didn't do too well, is that word of mouth. Whenever I talk to people about that movie, it was always like, oh man, that ending was stupid as fuck. My metric for this is talking with my mom, because she will usually be very, very easily swayed one way or the other based on how stupid the ending is. So.
Did your mom see this movie with you?
No, she did not.
Oh God, I wish fucking an Autumn quarter on this one would have been so good.
Autumn does not like spooky movies, although I don't think there was no way to know this. You know, I thought that it's kind of labeled as a horror movie. It's coming from Blumhouse. I thought that she wouldn't like it, even though she was familiar with she called Fantasy Island her babysitting show back in the day, because this, you know, for like a series from the 70s. So yeah, she said she heard it was bad, and that it was scary, and that she didn't like either of those things, so didn't want to go see it. So no Autumn quarter this week.
I will say, scary is not the word I would use to describe this movie. I mean, I suppose if you're fairly easily squeamish, there's some stuff in the beginning that could be considered kind of scary. But it falls more into like the action category in general.
Yeah. This barely qualifies as a horror film. Like I think if she had seen it, she would have been fine. But like, because it's been labeled as horror and kind of advertised like that, I mean, you know, I don't blame her for not wanting to see it.
Yeah. I mean, like even in the advertisements, like you've pretty much seen the worst of it, because the advertisements do include some of like the torture scene that's early on in the movie. And like that's pretty much as bad as it gets. It's a PG-13 movie, so like it's not gonna be horrible, horrifying, just gross body horror to it. You're pretty much looking at, oh, that girl got water dumped on her head. Wow.
I love how they were clearly going for the for like the Carrie like pig blood thing with that, you know, because she says that's about when she got the water dumped on her head at like the dance, but they had to just like, oh no, it was toilet water. Uh-oh, stinky.
And then like they had to clarify in that scene that like toilet water, nice, because it just looks like water.
Yeah, it looks like it looks like she just, you know, took a ride on Disney Splash Mountain, you know, your e-ticket attraction.
Oh, so I mean, like, I guess that leaves us on the question of like, did we like it or not? Because like, this is something that like I think we both have wrestled with, kind of even leading into this, because we've danced around it. We're 8 minutes in. Normally at this point, one of us would have been like, this movie sucks or this movie rules or something.
Yeah,
but there's not a clear answer to it.
This one's a little tough. I mean, I like. If you were asking me for a hard like yes or no recommendation, I would really struggle with that one, I think, because I think I overall kind of enjoyed it. Like it was stupid, but I wasn't bored.
It's really going to be on a person by person basis. I think it is. If you came to me and said, "Should I watch this?" I'd be like, "Who are you? What do you like? Would you enjoy this?" Because yes, I enjoyed it as well. I had a good time watching it. I wouldn't recommend it to most people, though. It doesn't really fall in that so bad it's good camp territory.
No.
There's just a lot of kind of weird stuff that happens in it. And I think like if you're the type of person that just watches a bunch of movies and just kind of like enjoys the act of being in a theater and like enjoys kind of just like seeing what people come up with, you'll probably get some enjoyment out of it. If you're the type of person that likes sitting down and picking apart scripts and being like, what the fuck were you guys doing here, you'll enjoy it. But like I think as far as general audiences go, I can't really imagine much enjoyment to be had from it.
This kind of actually goes with one of my broader, more like spoilery points, and that I think this would be an excellent movie to like discuss and pick apart in a screenwriting 101 class for several reasons.
I was walking out of the theater thinking, I kind of want to write an article about this movie because there's just so much to kind of pick apart and talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, if this is the sort of movie, like, if this had been, I kind of wonder if this had been like direct to Netflix, if people would have enjoyed it more. If this was like a Netflix and chill movie, you know?
I mean, it really does kind of feel like one, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's got nice little sectioned off parts where you can take a break from watching and come back to, and like things kind of happen and change. Like there's some Bird Box vibes to it.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I don't think I would, if, you know, General Joe Schmo came up to me and said, hey, is Fantasy Island of all things worth my time?
I mean, I to be fair, I don't think anyone will ask that, mostly because I think no one remembers Fantasy Island came out, and it came out 2 weeks ago.
I keep forgetting. I'm having a real, like, maybe it's because you planted the seed in my mind with the fact that the director of Invisible Man was the director of Upgrade, but I swear I'm having some title dementia with this one again. Like, I keep forgetting what it's called. Like Fantastic Fantasy Island, like Danganronpa 2 Island, like
Fantasy Island Goodbye Despair.
Yeah. Final Fantasy Island.
Final Fantasy Island Advent Children.
Oh God. Final Fantasy Island Spirits Within. All right, we're done with this bit. So point being, no, I don't think I would recommend like my mom to go see it, for example, even if it wouldn't be too spooky. If you're, you know, in a couple months when it's tossed directly onto Netflix and you're looking for something to do, I mean, you could do worse.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad streaming movie. Like, in general, it's not overly long, so like it's a good one to just kind of like turn on and chill out to. I mean, if you're the type of person that likes to get like a beer or two and watch a movie, like a bad movie that it might not be so bad it's good, but you're just watching a bad movie, like a psychopath like me, like, yeah, I would recommend watching it, as long as you're like not under the expectation it's going to be so bad it's good, and it's just kind of bad.
I'll tell you what, after seeing the 10% on Rotten Tomatoes and like talking about this with my mom, like, and the fact that we just picked this because it jumped out at me for being schlock, my expectations were rock bottom, so that might have something to do with like why I'd go as far as to say pleasantly surprised with my time with this.
For sure. I mean, yeah, when you look at it and go 10%, your first thought is, oh no. And then when you see it's a Sony movie, your second thought is, oh no.
That actually did not register with me, but in hindsight, it is all the Sony movie hallmarks. Holy shit.
But like, I had my expectations fairly low. And so for the first 75% of the movie, I was racking my brain trying to figure out what the fuck we could possibly talk about with this movie. There's one moment that I went, never mind, we're gonna be good. We're gonna have stuff to talk about. I'm not worried. We'll talk about that in spoilers. But like, yeah, for the first 75%, it's fairly generic. There's some interesting ideas happening throughout. And I think that's kind of a good segue into talking about our pre-spoiler analysis of the movie, in that this is a movie that has a surprising number of pretty decent ideas. And like, there's some clever stuff that they do with it, and there's some unique ideas and visuals, and there's some good stuff to be here. But they took all of that and then put it in one pot, and then threw that pot at a wall, and just kind of like... Yeah, that looks good enough for me.
So let's get into kind of the screenwriting 101 stuff, because I think this, when we talk about the beginning being kind of generic, I think that it'd be good to touch on exactly why, because I think that, again, if we're talking about like screenwriting 101, this is a really good example for like what goes wrong, what we mean when we say that something is cliche or like unexciting. And this is stuff that I'm pretty comfortable talking about. I got my master's in fine arts and creative writing. I'm officially the college teacher. This is your Freemo lesson. You don't have to pay a dime for this one, boys. So one of the earliest things when you're starting off writing stories is that you have to figure out what your characters want. Every story needs to have characters, and in order to drive the story forward, they need to take actions based on some sort of desire. Like, this is why if you can't figure out what your protagonist wants, they're just going to be kind of, mucking around, like hanging out in the background, getting guided by outside forces, and it'll feel like the movie is directionless. Really boring stuff. So what Fantasy Island, I think, as both a blessing and a curse, does is that it centers its entire premise on want, in that it is going to take a bunch of characters, going to introduce this little group, and the conflict and the whole setup of the story is going to be, what is it that these people want so badly they're going to go to some stupid mystic island with Michael Pena running the show. And that's kind of dangerous ground, because when you kind of strip away everything else, you are left pretty much solely with how interesting your characters are and how much complexity you're going to wrangle out of each of those desires, because you're seeing them play out very literally. And in a character-driven story with really strong characters, this can be very satisfying. I think that Persona 4, one of my favorite video games of all time, does similar stuff with the way that game handles its dungeons. Everything's very character driven. Everything's very like in your face, like kind of nakedly obvious, but it pays off because the characters are really well rounded and interesting. In this, we have 4 separate stories. Again, without going too much into spoilers, with our main crew, we have 3 of which are just absolute, like, well, 2 of which, at least I'll say, are absolutely cliche and boring. One of which has the potential to be interesting, but mostly feels like it's a completely different movie from the nonsense that's happening around it. And then one that, the one that comes closest to the horror, like, actually manages to like skirt the line of doing more interesting stuff. So the things that went wrong, number 1, is that by stripping everything away and leaving only the wants of the characters, you are forced to reckon with those characters, and I'm not liking what I'm seeing here.
2 of them almost have something. Almost. But you have 3 other assholes that have nothing. And of those 2 people who do have somethings, their somethings are thrown away fairly quickly.
Yeah. And so, like, I guess we could talk about, like, the boring people, if we're going to go into more detail about the people with actual potential, and that you have the guys whose fantasies are, like, probably what you think of when you hear the words Fantasy Island. They just want to be like Harold and Kumar, like weed smoking chads, and like throw a big house party and like, drink with models and all that stuff and be rich. So that's that.
Exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah,
it's exactly what you'd expect it to be. How exciting.
The fact that it's exactly what you'd expect, already a big mark against a movie where you're kind of banking on, because you're stripping so much away, you're banking on them doing something interesting. But because they go exactly where you think they're going, big strike 1.
Mm-hmm.
So strike 2 is that we have tortured police officer boy. He wants to play soldier. He wants to be a soldier and reconnect with his dead daddy. It's just about like every sad dad, like Band of Brothers war story in like 5 minutes.
And I have to give a half point, because for a little bit there was almost something interesting. There was almost some like good, interesting, kind of weird emotional drama to this storyline. And then they just kind of, much like the other 2, scrubbed it and kind of went their own separate way with it.
And this is almost where I think we get into screenwriting 101 problem number 2 on a broader level with structure, and that when you have everything for such a big chunk of the movie that feel like completely different movies in terms of tone, like, you have like a stoner comedy, like kind of a gritty like war drama. One of them is more of a straight up horror movie. The other one feels more like a romantic drama, like kind of chick flick sort of thing. Already weird jumping from back and forth, and the way that these stories are tied together is not graceful, to say the least.
I mean, the idea behind them, to go back to the fact that there are some interesting ideas, having the four of them split apart like that could be very interesting and could be very jarring and could be used effectively to heighten emotions within various scenes. So when you cut from the family-friendly kind of romantic drama thing going on to torture porn, like, holy shit, what the fuck is happening? Like, that's a really interesting idea on just heightening the emotion of all characters involved. But then you just get the duds that just immediately suck any sort of emotional resonance out, and you don't care.
Yeah, it's not that, like, that sort of cognitive dissonance can't and isn't effective in certain parts of this movie. It's more that I think this is almost a place where the fact that the movie is, like, mercifully pretty lean kind of almost goes against it, because I think the other problem is that when you are juggling those tones, like, you want to make sure that you're just creating more work for yourself instead of just making a good horror movie or making a good romantic drama or making a good war movie or making a good stoner comedy. You have to try and make a good all four of those things. So when you're presented with that challenge, that's when it becomes very easy to fall into cliche. With a lot of the dialogue just ripped from straight other movies, like, you can predict every beat, like, as it's going to happen. Part of that's also, again, with the premise, the fact that they, like, lean so heavily into the ominous, like, ooh, you gotta play out your fantasies to the end, be careful what you wish for, monkey's paw, which, like, is part of the fun of the premise. I'm not saying that, you can't make a movie like that. But again, when everything else is already so shallow, it's kind of like, yeah, all right, something's gonna go wrong, like the IRS is gonna come and, like, bust down Party Boy's doors or whatever. Like, I get it.
Well, let's use this as a transition then into spoilers, because I do kind of want to talk about that monkey paw curling element to the movie and kind of where it doesn't work on that too. What a shocker. So before we do, next week is actually going to be Invisible Man, unless something happens. I was gonna say I promise, but fuck me, I can't anymore. We've missed dates so many times now, it's not even goddamn funny. If you enjoyed the show, you can go follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. If you want to support us, over at patreon.com/BADHcast. If you want to leave us a review on iTunes, we'd very much appreciate it. And tell some friends, pass us around, all that good stuff. We appreciate it. Let's talk spoilers, shall we?
Wait, before we get into spoilers, I have one extra bit to add into our pre-spoiler advertising. You may very well be watching this on my YouTube channel, just Jackson Keller, just my name. Yeah, we're making a bigger YouTube push. So if you do happen to be one of those people, would really appreciate it if you gave the video a nice thumbs up, left us a little bit of a comment, and hit that subscribe button, because you'll see more, as well as a slurry of other nonsense I'm gonna give you. So
we can't do that every week, though. That fucking like, comment, subscribe just made me die inside a little bit.
Well, we gotta bust it out sometime.
That's fine. We can do it sometimes. That can't be a weekly thing, man. Oh my god. Oh, I felt my soul leave my body.
Welcome to capitalism, friends.
Speaking of capitalism, rich fuck's fantasy is garbage.
I mean, it really is. They are all...
the twist, though?
There is none. I think it's supposed to be... It's almost like it's played for comedy. Like, like all these wacky guys are getting into some hijinks. So, like, it's just that, if you're rich, you might have Russian gunmen come after you, I guess.
What? Like, I just don't understand how that's any sort of monkey's paw thing. Because, like, there's always, like, an ironic twist to it or something like that. This isn't ironic. This is just Russian gunmen coming after them.
Well, it's almost... it's another thing the movie does that maybe in the hands of a more capable writer could be almost clever, like a no ethical consumption under capitalism, like all labor is exploitative. Because like when they call I don't even remember the character's name. When they call Michael Pena and they're like, "Yo, fam, like end the fantasy," like, and he was like, "Hey, you said you wanted all that money, didn't say how you got it." So like that, you could maybe do something with that and have we got all this money from like organized crime and the Russian mob, like in some sort of commentary there that maybe they are barely reaching for, but not really. And then we got to move on to more dumb stoner comedy shit. So
yeah, it's utter nonsense. And like, there is an argument to be made that like, because, and here's the big twist, it's all part of Melanie's fantasy to kill everyone else on the island. Wow. Like, you can make the argument that like that's the irony isn't there because it's part of her fantasy and doesn't really come into play there. But like, there's irony to the other ones.
There's irony to the other ones, and just on like a meta level, like that's part of the fun of a premise like this. Like you want to kind of live in that like like monkey's paw, like little twists. I guess we haven't really talked about what Melanie's like original stated desire is, because it's the most like interesting out of all of them.
Yeah, and like it's also the most horror related and successful at being horror related. Melanie wants to get revenge on a high school bully, and so they kidnap the high school bully and torture her. Like, they physically torture her, and it's mortifying. And it's this question of like, how far will this person go? Very kind of Stanford prison experiment, or like, the other psychological experiments of like, you have permission to do what you want, will you go this far? It's fascinating. And like, from the situational irony of the audience knowing that that's actually a person and not just like the hologram that she thinks it is, there's a lot of tension underlying it, and that it almost becomes very successful as a horror thing.
Yeah, and that her character, like it's a pretty convincing performance, as we find out it is in universe even a performance. Like, this is some real stupid like 5D chess shit. So like, she decides to record herself torturing her, knowing full well that she's a real person because she's the mastermind behind all of this. And it seems really convinced. She's like, ooh, like, what are all these toys we can play? Like, oh wow, like those holograms. Like, yeah, that's super convincing. And like, you do as the audience, like, fair credit to the filmmakers, like, you do buy it. That like, that's part of what makes the scene effective, is that there is theoretically that dissonance there. Once you find out that she's been masterminding this all along and like purposefully let her free and like recorded this video and like was playing this 5D chess sort of thing. I mean, it's astounding, like a Dragon Ball villain level of hubris to do this, like to gather everyone and like explain your master plan. Like, she becomes such a cartoon character. It's unbelievable. Even when I think like as an actress, like, and as like a character, she was the most interesting out of everybody.
And once again, going back to the idea that there's like something interesting in almost everything that they're doing, even in this stupid 5D chess thing that they pull here, there's an underlying element of like, well, she's the only person that doesn't have a black goo monster as her fantasy. There's theoretically a way you could have picked out that Sloane wasn't part of her fantasy in that way. Like, there's theoretically foreshadowing within there, but it just comes across as so fucking stupid that it loses all sense of cleverness.
Yeah, well, because that raises its own question of if she is, if her real desire is to like get this revenge, like why does she need the island to do that then? Like, can't she just lock them all in a room like Jigsaw style?
And set a fire. That feels like a very good irony thing to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why do we need to get like Michael Pena to play like Monokuma by way of Hugh Hefner? Like, why are we doing this?
I mean, well, let's kind of talk about some of the other characters too, because we've talked about Soldier, we've talked about Melanie, and like, I think I want to talk about specifically Gwen, Maggie Q's character, and how her kind of drama, psychological family drama thing was almost good. And then we will end this by nitpicking the ending, but like, it's warranted.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this movie's dumb.
So I mean, that's the other person that we mentioned that has like a very interesting idea to it is Gwen, who wants to go back to the time that she turned down her would-be fiance and say yes at that point, get married and have children. And there's a lot of her struggling with the fact that she has all of a sudden had 5 years of memories implanted within her and now remembers that she has this husband and child, and like the conflict of knowing that they're not actually hers and not actually part of her life is fascinating and kind of harrowing despite the movie it's in.
Gwen sections were the first parts where I started thinking like you could make this its own movie and make it really effective, and in fact I'm sure that somebody has. Like it's a simple idea, but it's one that's got a lot of emotional resonance, and they really do, like you say, touch on some interesting stuff. That like monkey's paw twist, that it's not so obnoxious as like, ooh, like she wanted a child and the child turned out to be like a school shooter, bro. Like, isn't that crazy? Like nothing stupid like that. But just like that like, nagging dread, like that's really good. That's really subtle. That's really clever. Poof, bye-bye, family goes away in favor of more dumb Melanie mastermind plot.
Oh man, and this is where it starts to get just wild. This isn't even where I would consider it to be like nitpick territory yet. Like I'm thinking entirely in the caves. The caves is where it gets off the fucking rails. Yeah.
Well, because I think what separates my nitpicks, at least from what I would consider, again, more like broad screenwriting level issues, that if we're talking about wants and we're talking about motivations, the motivations in this movie are super fucking weak. like as a villain, as our tragic, like, damage tattooed on her forehead villain. Like 3 out of the 5 people that she's wanting to get revenge on, like the connection to her, not even her boyfriend, a guy she almost went on a date with. And the movie tries to act like it's clever by pointing this out, that they went out one time, that's her motivation. Like, of those people, 2 of them were just his roommates that like didn't call when the fire was happening or something.
Let's take let me put the pause on what you're saying here for a second, because I feel like this episode might have people who just go, fuck it, it's Fantasy Island, who cares? I'm gonna listen to the spoiler section and explain what the fuck he's talking about. So at one point, Gwen decides that she does not want her husband and child anymore, and she wants to actually go back and pick a different fantasy and try and save someone who died in the apartment complex above her during a fire. A fire that she explicitly says is her fault. And she says that earlier in the movie as well, without really elaborating on it. I think this is important to point out, because this motivation also turns out to be super fucking weak. Yes, yeah, entirely. Yes. Because the fire, it turns out, was started because she left like a tea kettle on or something like that. It sounded like there was maybe like something more malicious, like she knew about something and like didn't say anything for some like personal reason. No, she made tea and forgot to turn off the fucking stove. How horrible. But so as she's going through this again, she starts to realize that she recognizes people from the island in this fake fantasy. She sees Brax and JD, the bros, Cheech and Chong. And then as she's going through, she runs into wannabe army guy who's the cop. And like earlier on, he makes a reference to like, I let someone die I could have saved. And it turns out that it was their upstairs roommate, Nick. And Nick is Melanie's one-time got coffee together person. You can't even call him her boyfriend. No, you can't at all. And so Melanie, after the death of Nick in this fire, decides to exact revenge on these 4 people who are, I mean, I will give the tea kettle woman, sure, all right, I can see you blaming them just in like the irrationality of losing someone you cared about. Fine. The cop, once again, there's something to be said for just the irrationality of losing someone you care about. The roommate?
Because they didn't call. Like, oh my god, it's so stupid. Like, yeah.
They had assumed that Nick was not in his apartment complex at the time, so they didn't bother. That's not something that's, like, horrible.
Like, that's not something that's worth fantasy islanding them for. Like, Jesus Christ. I mean, they end up getting chased by like black goo men. You know, one of them almost gets their hand cut off. One of them dies and only gets resurrected through what turns out to be a stupid reference to the '70s show that nobody's gonna get.
I definitely did not understand it until we were reading Wikipedia articles.
Exactly. Like, I thought it was just a dumb bit that they brought back at the end.
So I mean, that's the context that you need to have if you've not watched the movie, and I don't blame you if you haven't.
Yeah. So as you can see, it's pretty weak sauce motivations all around. Nothing terribly complex. Like, there's something in theory there with the connection. Because I'm assuming this is where we were going next. Because you had all these people directly connected to the incident, and then you have Sloane, the other like real person there. And so, like, well, why, like, Sloane doesn't really fit in here. So there's something to be said if Melanie was less of a poorly written character, for like her grand like Frieza speech about.
Oh, we should explain why Sloane's there.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So Sloane is there because she was her high school bully.
Yeah, and this is the real high school bully, which again, like, maybe could be considered foreshadowing, because everyone else, like the husband and the child and military daddy and the Russians, they're all made out of black goo fantasy island material. There's also like a nemesis doctor that chases them around.
I believe his name was Dr. Torture.
Dr. Torture. Oh my god. Yeah, so, like, on the one hand, like, maybe if like Nick actually like was her boyfriend and like actually was like a stabilizing influence to a person.
Oh my god, that's who the detective was in this. It's Yondu from Guardians.
Oh, you didn't realize that? Yeah.
No, I was trying to figure out why he looked familiar. Holy shit. There's a detective subplot. Don't worry about it.
The only important thing about the detective subplot is that Nemesis yeets the detective off a mountain.
And that is where I knew we'd have something to talk about.
There was a surprising number of people in the theater for like 4:00 on a Tuesday. Everyone erupted into laughter when that happened. It looked like a Shooting Stars meme. It was great.
Oh, it's so dumb. Sorry, continue talking about Sloane.
But yeah, so like there is a connection there. Like, it's not completely tenuous of like, I am a troubled person who had a lot of hashtag Joker damage growing up. I used to think my life was a tragedy. Now I realize it's a comedy. And so I'm gonna rope in the author of all my pain with the rest of these chuckle fucks who I also hate. Fine. But then that like connection between her past and her character.
No, you know what the answer here is?
What?
Sloane was shown earlier on getting, like, she's the first character you see in the movie, and she's like getting chased by people on Fantasy Island. I don't know whether the terrifying Icor men or whether they're the fucking just staff at the hotel. But like, what you do there is you have someone torturing her and then have her die. So like, it's Melanie moving through her traumas. Like, you set up the risk of the movie, and then from there, she goes in and says, like, I already killed the person who fucked me up so bad.
Oh, yeah, that's
opposed to having this bullshit thing where they're like, this group of people ruined part of my life, and also she did like 10 years ago. But like, you know what? We're gonna all put you in the same Venn diagram. It's good. You're all dying together.
See. Well, you know why they did that. Here's another screenwriting 101 tip, folks. Do you know why they did that, right?
Please enlighten me.
it's so they could have a shocking twist, so they could have some fake out character development where like she has a heart to heart with Sloane, and then you realize as the audience that she was, you know, the Bond villain manipulating everything all along. Even when character motivation wise, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
My dude, I didn't even pick that up, and like that is fucking basic goddamn writing. But like this movie is so just daft in so many ways that like I didn't even put the two and two together. It didn't feel like a twist to me. It was just like, what the fuck is happening?
No, it totally was supposed to be like a shocking twist. So there's another screenwriting tip. If you're going to have a twist, you know, a good twist is one that feels consistent with the behaviors and motivations of the characters that you have established thus far, that you could maybe paint things in a new light instead of just like, I'm the greatest actor of all time, and like my 20-step master plan has gone off perfectly because I'm playing like 5D chess. You're not Revolver Ocelot. Don't try it.
So on the topic of motivations and behaviors, let's talk about the last 15 minutes. Let's talk about the cave. And I just want to talk about like probably the most like just endemic moment of the entire movie that just kind of represents everything else that goes on in it. So this is going to kind of start off sounding cinema sinsy, but bear with me here. At one point, back to the detective subplot, actually a little bit. The detective subplot hands her a water bag full of the water on the island, which is what's causing the island to do all its Fantasy Island things. Don't worry about it. Don't think too hard about it. It's
hashtag just Fantasy Island.
Hashtag just Fantasy Island things. So she carries this with her for a while, and then they're in the caves. And at one point, apropos of nothing, she takes it off. She just puts it on the ground and goes about her day. And I'm just like, why? What are you doing? What is happening here? Well, then Sloane picks it up. And like, okay, Melanie dropping it, no motivation, no character reason why she did it. Sloane picking it up.
My arm hurts.
Didn't even say that. Say that. That's at least something.
That's something. Also, that would be more forgivable if this wasn't part of her like 20-step like Revolver Ocelot plan. The fact that this is a huge oversight on her part that she lets go of that bottle for even a fucking second.
The fact that she has the bottle at all. She could have thrown it off a cliff at some point and just be like, I don't know where it went. Point notwithstanding. Sloane picks it up. Makes sense. Sloane knows about the detective subplot. It's like, oh, we need to get this off the island so like this place will get shut the fuck down. Great. All right, sure. My thought is like, okay, they've established that there's a Sloane clone somewhere along the way in here. Was something else that we haven't set up at all. And also something that the movie doesn't really set up at all. There's just like this shadow version of Sloane wandering around on the island.
I am a shadow of the true self.
Yeah, the confrontation is the most Persona fucking thing in the goddamn world.
Speaking of fucking Persona.
And like, I'm like, okay, so what this is a way to tell which one's the real Sloane. You know, you keep an eye on the canteen and you'll be able to tell that one's the real Sloane. No, they just talk Persona and be like, no, I'm me. I renounce you. And as opposed to fucking opening up a whole boss fight, it just ends the scene. And so I'm like, okay, that wasn't what the canteen was for. And as it turns out, the canteen is this fucking Deus Ex Machina that they had to like fucking go through 3 steps to get into Sloane's hands for no fucking reason so that she can drink the water and have her own fantasy in which fucking Melanie is killed. Y'all keep track of that? Did that make sense to you? Because that is legitimately what happened. I didn't skip anything.
No, you did not skip anything. And so here comes your next screenwriting 101 tidbit. You may have heard of a thing, dear audience, called Chekhov's gun. It's the idea that things that you set up earlier in the movie should be paid off later in the movie. The gun comes from the statement that, you know, if there is a gun on set in the first scene of the movie, it should go off in the third act. So that's clearly what they're trying to do here. Except that why Chekhov has the gun here Chekhov shouldn't have the gun, and it shouldn't really be a gun in the first place, and it makes no sense that.
Also, Chekhov doesn't have the gun. Chekhov's fucking friend Jack has the gun, and Jack needs to just casually throw it in off screen at some point so that Chekhov can have the gun.
Yeah. I mean, Melanie's inventory got a little too full. She had to drop stuff to keep from being overburdened. Otherwise, she can't fast travel around the caves anymore.
Oh, fuck me. And she kind of does, too.
So, fuck, is there anything else we want to say about this fucking cave scene? Because, like, they just go off in different directions for seemingly no reason at all. Like, I guess the idea is that Fantasy Island's toying with their minds to, like, split up the group. It's stupid.
It really, really fucking is. I don't know. Is there anything else left to say about the cave twist? I mean, I will say this. So, at the end of this whole cave nonsense, they end up in the central room where there's this stone and the water that somehow does the Fantasy Island thing. Hashtag just Fantasy Island things. And
it looks like the Master Emerald, by the way.
It does. Yeah. No, it's stupid. Sloane drinks the water and they're like, oh, what's your deepest wish? And she's like, my deepest wish is that you're with Nick forever. And then the burned Nick body that has been looming in the background, inexplicably, honestly, why has Nick been in the background? We can't talk about that. That's a whole nother thing.
Well, I mean, that's another big problem in the movie is that it feels like, to me, this feels like Jason Blum over at Blumhouse chomping on his cigar and going, we make all movies here. We gotta have more horror elements in this movie. Put in a spooky burn man in the scenes. That's also kind of what I feel like is going on with Shadow Sloane as well. Like, they just need to have a creepy girl crawl on the wall at some point because it's a Blumhouse movie.
I did forget that she did fucking train spotting up the wall at one point there. So... Yeah, so she says, hey, I want you to be with Nick forever, and Nick leaps out of that pool that's under the Master Emerald, pulls Melanie in, and then, oh my god, we need to talk about the grenade in a minute. But before we talk about the grenade, he pulls Melanie in, and she dies in the water. The fact that Sloane's wish is for Melanie to die with this fucking stupid one-liner is nothing. Like, the fact that overpowers her desire to, like, get back with her husband after everything else that has gone wrong. And she's like, no, I want you to die at Nick's hands. Like, there's this level of irony to it that is just nonsensical in this moment.
Like, it also, like, if we're going like CinemaSins territory, it makes me wonder, like, how come, like, she's able to just get like an insta win when at this point, like, Melody has an entire Fantasy Island of Nemesis goons at her disposal that can, like, materialize into air and then, like, teleport around basically.
That's also entirely fair.
No, it's dumb. You know what else is dumb?
The grenade.
I actually forgot about the grenade, but we gotta go over this first. Yeah, it's the grenade.
So, the fucking grenade. They've been setting up this whole thing that fucking cop army dude's daddy, Captain America, had a grenade at one point. And by that I mean he threw his body on a grenade and blew himself up to save his soldiers. Obviously a heroic act. Obviously, you know, I'm not here to make fun of that. What I'm here to make fun of is the fact that Cop Army dude did the exact same thing, and that is just like the dumbest fucking screenwriting contrivance I've ever seen in my goddamn life.
It's poetry. It rhymes, like Joestar Legacy going on thing. There's your bingo, folks. I made references to all three at some point in this episode. So, like, he throws the grenade, and, you know, you have to have that, you know, it's poetry, it rhymes, like father, like son, whatever dumb, hackneyed, trite, cliche bullshit. The thing that makes the grenade extra hilarious is that it's like a clown car, like, prop. Like, there's a whole, like, action scene revolving around Baxter. What the fuck's his name?
Brax. Like the character from Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
So like Brax is like grappling with like the Russian mobster dudes, and like it's played like a fucking Looney Tune. Like if they let go of the grenade, they'll all blow up, and it's like switching hands, and everyone's like making big exaggerated like sighs of relief. So it's the grenade's basically a joke at this point, and then they play it for such serious hackneyed drama. It's such an eye roller,
especially and like this. The grenade at one point gets thrown into this pool where Melanie drowns, which means it's a deep pool. Like, she gets pulled fully under, and like it has its pin in it when she gets pulled under. At some point, while she's being pulled under, she has the wherewithal to find the grenade, pull herself out, pull the pin out, chuck the grenade out, and then get dragged back down. The fact that this grenade is findable at all says a lot, but like, what the fuck?
She really is just like a Dragon Ball villain. Like, while she's going down, she's gonna try and take the planet with her, except she needs to find the grenade in the pool first. She can't just create it.
Oh, what were you gonna say before we grenaded?
So I'm glad you reminded me of the grenade. That shit was hilarious. But I want to talk about Michael Pena's character for a bit, because like he gets a redemption arc because like he's the game master of fucking Fantasy Island because of his dead wife or some shit, whatever. And then of course Gwen convinces him to come back to the light. Kylo Ren. Let her go, move on, help us, yada, yada, yada.
Well, she never had to convince him to come back to the light. He was never a bad guy. It was just love. It's like Mr. Freezy from Batman.
I mean, like, see, because this is, I say that Michael Pena is playing Monokuma by way of Hugh Hefner in this movie, and I stand by that characterization. But also that's like if Monokuma had like a change of heart and everyone just kind of decided to let him go at the end. Like literally they're getting on the plane and they're like, "Hey, you're responsible for keeping us in this like death game," because that's basically what this is. But like, haha, man, wink wink nudge nudge, 1-star review on Yelp. It's like, put this man in jail. Like, Jesus Christ. Amazing. Also, if Michael Pena is let go of his wife, why is he even staying on the island?
Because they need to set up him and Tattoo being the Fantasy Island hosts, and like, they did give some fucking reason of like he has to stay and protect this land or something.
a weak non-screenwriting reason.
Yeah, it was utter nonsense. It's just like, we can't make him responsible at this point, and like, what the fuck are we gonna do? Are we gonna go to the cops and explain this shit? There's no way.
It's just so crazy because the movie opens like with like his goons like dragging this poor woman around, like kidnapping her in the middle of the night, like dressed in all black, wearing face masks and stuff. It's some pretty shady stuff, and yet by the end of the movie we're just like, "Oh, Michael Pena, you scamp."
Oh, kidnapping, attempted murder. Oh, it just just Fantasy Island things. Oh.
The movie had a dumb, if you want another bit of Autumn Keller goodness, she calls them Scooby-Doo endings, and I think that's an appropriate term for this one.
This whole movie is basically a Scooby-Doo movie, honestly.
It kind of is a Scooby-Doo movie. All you need is the terrifying CGI dog from Call of the Wild, and you'll have it in there.
All right, are we done talking about Scooby-Doo?
I think we're done.
Scooby-Doo on Fantasy Island?
I think...
Scooby-Doo on Fantasy Island has to be a thing, right?
There's Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
There's Scooby-Doo on Monster Island.
There's Scooby-Doo in the Cyber Chase, which is basically Scooby-Doo in the Computer Island.
I had a Scooby-Doo in the Cyber Chase game for Game Boy Advance.
That's amazing. Dude, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island was fucking brutal. Like, that shit fucked me up as a kid.
There is no Fantasy Island Scooby-Doo crossovers, but CNET's review of Fantasy Island does say it feels like a Scooby-Doo movie. So,
well, there you go. We rest our case.
All right. I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter, Sean_McKinda, twitch.tv/Skippy, and my Letterboxd account if you really want to keep track of that. I watched a bunch of movies this week, so hey, I mean, I guess you can go see that. I don't know, man. I don't know what the fuck Letterboxd is, just so I can keep track of my stuff for the horror season at the end of the year.
And I've been Jackson Keller. You can find me primarily on YouTube now. If you're not watching from there, go to my channel. It's just my name, Jackson Keller. I post all sorts of stuff there. We'll be posting Beating a Dead Horse episodes. Have a nice playlist of all those going forward. We'll have clips from my Twitch channel. I edit down for your viewing pleasure. Twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller if you want to catch those live. All sorts of other good stuff coming. It's going to be a content slurry because that's what YouTube is.
Huzzah! What a good algorithm.
I mean, it's the best in the business. That's why we're using it.
If you want to keep in contact with the podcast, keep up to date with what's going on, so we'll let you know if, oops, we can't watch Invisible Man. You can do so by following us at BADH_cast on Twitter. If you've enjoyed the show and are like, you know what? I like this and I want to give these people money. You can do so over at patreon.com/BADHcast. At $1 a month, you get access to our Discord, which gives you pretty much direct access to yelling at the two of us for spending an hour talking about Fantasy Island, and I would not blame you for that. At $5 a month, you get access to all of our past bonus episodes. We've got a bunch of them out there now, and they're all really fucking good. So go listen to those if you are in our $5 tier. $10 a month gets you access to everything you've heard before. Plus, you can request bonus episodes. So if you've got something you really want us to watch, like Barbie Horse Adventure, we will do that. Please don't request that, but we will. You also get a little something something.
Thank you so much to our glorious stallions. Thank you so much, Travis, Julia, Mom, Aunt Summer. Y'all are great. Y'all, money.
Also, thanks to Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out wherever you can. If you got to stream them, if you can buy their albums, if you can go see them live, go do that. They're a great live band too. Also, thanks to 25yearslatersite.com. You got a little button of us down in the corner that you can go click on. But before you click on that button, what you should really do is you should see what else is happening on that website. They've got a bunch of really talented writers doing a bunch of really talented writing stuff. They've got movies, TV shows, music, wrestling, video games, reviews, news, interviews, all that good stuff. Please. Oof. That was a crack. Go support them however you can. They're wonderful, wonderful people. Next week, theoretically, we're talking about Invisible Man.
If it's not there, it's because we turned it invisible.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go